I showed my well-regarded short documentary, Tain't Nobody's Business, at a bilingual film festival in Montreal. A black lesbian in the audience stood up during the Q&A and said, "I don't know why you made this, but I'm glad you did." Obviously, I'm not black. I'm queer, I'm Jewish, but I am deeply involved in black culture from having studied it, from having lived in Africa. These are all sort of externals. There's this sense of connection that I have that ultimately I don't think I can explain. The first short that I did was Ma Rainey's Lesbian Licks. Ma Rainey's Lesbian Licks was a cover of a 1926 song that Ma Rainey had recorded that celebrates lesbian love.
Went out last night with a crowd of my friends. They must have been women, 'cause I don't like no men.
It showed me how much enthusiasm there was in the black community for this kind of project, no matter where it came from. From that point on, I was hooked on the filmmaking as a process and on the community that I was working with and I think serving to some degree. After that, I made Congo Cabaret, our first narrative short, with Quincy and DeAndre Gosfield, who took over the reins and did a bang-up job.
Good afternoon.
Beautiful short, based on a script that I had adapted from a Harlem Renaissance novel by Claude McKay, who was himself a gay writer. For Shoga Films, there flows 3 lines of inquiry. Number 1, the interrelations of blackness and queer identity. Number 2, the comparison of black and Jewish identity. What are their similarities, their parallels, their differences, and what do they have to say about minority status in America? The third area is cultural production as markers of identity and areas of resistance. I focus on music because I love music. I don't know that any artist can ultimately understand the source of his or her passion, where it comes from, where it takes him. What I want to prove is the importance of being an ally. God knows in these fragmented times, we need as much bridge building and mutual acceptance and listening as we can get.
Later. Good afternoon or good evening. I'm Robert Philipson of Shoga Films, and this is one in our occasional series of Shoga Speaks. Those of you who have been following Shoga Films online or on social media know that May is the centenary of the musical Shuffle Along, which was the first Black-produced musical show to hit Broadway after an absence of 12 years. And it really revolutionized theater traditions in New York and eventually nationwide. That is being celebrated in various ways in various other venues. We're celebrating it by concentrating on Eubie Blake's music. In order to have an in-depth conversation about that, I'm going to introduce you to jazz pianist Ehud Asherie, who came to this country when he was 8 years old, lived in New York, or has been living in New York, fell in love with jazz during the time when he was here, and hanging around jazz circles and through educating himself and apprenticeships here and there, he's become a master jazz pianist, has released quite a few recordings. What's unusual about Ehud is that he's really found kinship with earlier piano styles, which we would think of as historical, ragtime and stride. And it was through that interest that he became familiar with the repertoire of the early part of the 20th century. came upon Eubie Blake's compositions, and he's going to make a very convincing argument that Eubie Blake is vastly underrated as a composer. And he made the decision to put out an album of covers of the songs from Shuffle Along. This was very unexpected. In 2008 or so, he did it before George C. Wolfe put his adaptation of the show on Broadway. Even though the album appeared that same year, 2016, the two projects were conceived independently. So that being said, Ehud, will you join us?
Hi, Robert.
Hi.
How you doing?
Good. It's good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
It's actually our first time seeing one another. We've only spoken on the phone. You have anything else you care to add to the introduction before we go into the
No, what you said was great. I just wanted to clarify. So I recorded the songs from the album Shuffle Along. It was 2014 that I recorded them. And it came out on the Blue Heron label in 2016. But, I had been playing the songs, I would say since about 2009, 2010, I'd been exploring this music.
Right. And I will, if I have time, I'll put a link to the Blue Heron where you can make the purchase off Blue Heron.
Great.
But let's get into the meat of the material. We agreed to talk about 5 songs from the show, and we're starting with one that isn't as the song that everybody knows. I'm Just Wild About Harry. We'll end our discussion with that. But there's a song that I find even more beautiful than I'm Just Wild About Harry. And it was more controversial because it depicted a romantic love between the lead and the lady. This was absolutely normal in musicals of the early part of the 20th century. Well, it's normal now. What was different about it was that everybody was black. And at the time, African Americans were seen as comic figures, incapable of real romance. So to bring this on was really very daring. Eubie Blake, there are several songs in which the characters speak of their love for one another. But this is a very romantic ballad. I'm Just Wild About Harry, which really took off in popular culture, was up-tempo song. I'm just, Love Will Find a Way it's a beaut. That's all I can say about it. What we'd like to do is play you an excerpt from it, and then Ehud is going to take it from there. Before I play the excerpt, Ehud, is there anything that the listeners should be have their ear cocked for?
No, I think a song speaks for itself.
Okay, let's hear it then.
Come, dear, and don't let our faith weaken. Let's keep our love fast burning bright. Your love for me is a heavenly beacon, guiding me through love's darkest night. Don't start minding or fault finding, no matter how dark one's path may grow. Fate won't hurry, well, don't worry, we'll just keep our hearts aglow. For love will find a way, though now skies are gray. Love like ours can never be ruled. Cupid's not schooled that way. Dry each tear dim night, clouds will soon roll by, though fate may lead us astray, my darling, mark what I say, love will find a way.
Ehud, it's on you.
So, yeah, this song has been a personal favorite of mine for many years. Just quickly to say that this, of course, everybody knows I'm just wild about Harry from the show, but Love Will Find a Way has made its way into the, I would say the B side of the jazz repertoire through various jazz pianists who played it. Famously, Willie the Lion Smith recorded it on a record, and also there's some versions of Eubie playing and singing it. So it's kind of a little, definitely not as known as I'm Swell by Harry, but it's a little more known. The thing also with this song is that this was specifically written for Shuffle Along. We know from Eubie Blake himself that there were only 3 songs that were written for Shuffle Along. That was I'm Just Wild About Harry, Bandana Days, and Love Will Find a Way. So in a way, which that's a common practice, Eubie took his older songs and then put it in the show, which every composer, from George Gershwin or that's what was done at that time. But you definitely get a sense that like Eubie Blake was doing his best to create a masterpiece here. First, the thing that strikes me out is that, and this is a little hard for us to keep in perspective because now it's 2021 and this was written in 1921. So our ears have become accustomed to a lot of things that for back then were never done before. So this song especially, and I hope I'm not getting too technical here, but the harmonic modulations are just very bold. Simply put it, Eubie is in one key, and then out of nowhere he just modulates to another key, not even really preparing it. It's just kind of out of the blue, yet it makes perfect sense, which is, to me, it's like this is a thing that a genius does. They do something which kind of breaks all the rules and shouldn't work, yet it works perfectly and it sounds perfectly natural. And to me, that's uniquely Eubie. He's able to do that time and time again. He's in F, and then he goes to A flat major, just out of the blue, and then he comes again, and he goes up a step, and he does the same thing again. That's just in the verse, right? So it's like before the song has even started, it's a masterpiece with just the verse.
Right. And you'll notice that. That must be hard for singers to master it. There are a lot of unusual key changes.
That's absolutely right. And also, it's funny because there's a lot of songs in jazz that all the songs have verses. 99% of standards have verses. And there's a reason they're not well known. Some of them are just not that good. The song was great. And then you have some songs that the verse is actually better than the song. And then you have these rare gems, I would say maybe like a, Stardust or Someone to Watch Over Me or like Love Will Find a Way, where they're just both so great. And, it just, it takes you somewhere else to have both these elements done. The other thing about Love Will Find a Way is that it really, like I've always said, to me, Eubie Blake is extremely underrated as a song composer because he's known for his rags and his piano pieces, but to me, he's right up there, with like a Jerome Kern or, a Harold Arlen in the architecture of his melodies. Eubie really comes out of the classical tradition of the bel canto singing, meaning, classical pianists, they tried to imitate the human voice because that was the ultimate kind of expression, and obviously that's a challenge on the piano because piano is it's part string instrument and it's part percussion instrument. So to make it sound really legato and truly singing is a challenge. But Eubie really does that on this tune, and one of the things that he really does like nobody else is, Rachmaninoff, Sergei Rachmaninoff, he always spoke of the point in every song, where it's like there's this certain point, and songs can have many points, but it's like all the melodies kind of unfold and then expand into these points. They expand, they contract, and Eubie, like, this is incredible. I can, if you like, I can demonstrate, or
Yeah, go ahead.
what I was saying. So you know how he says, and then it unfolds. So this kind of idea that there's a leap, and then it comes down, and then it goes up by step, and then it comes down, and it's really, it's perfect. Again, I'm pretty sure, and again, well, this is my speculation, but I think, obviously, like, I think Eubie just, he kind of heard it that way, just because this kind of melody was inherent in him. But yet it follows, you could analyze this in any kind of classical analysis, and it would just be pure perfection. And again, I think that's just, the guy was a genius. I mean, he just really was, he had a special genius for these kind of melodies, which, there's a lot of other great composers that come out of the jazz world, but some don't have this kind of melodicism. It's like their thing is more of a rhythmic feeling, or there's certain riffs, but Eubie, it's literally like it's meant for melody, and I think that's why it's so, he really hits you right in the heart emotionally, because it's the voice.
Yeah, I'm just gonna second what you're saying, because I was not really aware of, except for the more famous pieces, of course, Memories of You, which is not in Shuffle Along, but is one of his more famous pieces.
Yeah.
Not aware of just the astonishing musical attributes of this one score, and Love Will Find a Way. It blew me away. It is such a beautiful, sweeping, romantic piece.
It's such, I know, like I said, I just goes to mention is, I actually, when I did it for the album Shuffle Along in 2014, that was the second time I recorded it. I actually had recorded it before on a duo record with a great saxophonist, Harry Allen, and in a duo record we did, and I think that was 2010 or 11, I'm not sure, because, yeah, it's just such a beautiful tune, and I think all of these songs, and what attracts me to them is that it's amazing that songs that were written 100 years ago and more, we're talking about 100 years later, because, and I think there's something to the fact that this music, there's a lot of great music out there, and there's some certain songs which are great, but when you go to play them, it's as if like you kind of have to play them the way that they were written, because that's the way it is. With these songs, it's not like that. It's like you could play it a million different ways, with different rhythms, in different tempos, with different moods, and it would always be great, because they offer some kind of, there's a certain amount of freedom inherently built into these songs, and it's very special repertoire. There's a reason where jazz musicians are still playing Body and Soul and All the Things You Are, and for me, these Eubie songs are right up there with those. They really are.
Let me jump in just to keep it moving forward. The point you made about how these songs can be reinterpreted in any number of ways. We're going to have proof of that when we get to I'm Just Wild About Harry. So we get to come back to that point. The one of the things that you introduced me to and your work was a song from the show that is unknown. Nobody's done a recording of it but you, called Everything Reminds Me of You. Another gorgeous melody. I'm surprised that it didn't get picked up in sort of Eubie compilation albums. Never has been, it hasn't been. We're gonna play, I don't have much to say about it in terms of its impact because it didn't have any impact.
Yeah.
But we're gonna listen to an excerpt from it, and then you can address how you found it and other remarks you might want to make about it. So here we go.
So thanks Robert. That was Everything Reminds Me of You. So it's funny, very funny, because when I was looking for songs in Shuffle Along, it was actually quite easy to find a lot of things, because when I was looking, which was when it were 10ish years ago, the songs were already all in the public domain. So I actually just found most of the obscure ones in university archives online. This song, I just think it's a gem, first of all. And throughout the song, Eubie is doing the same thing in Love Will Find a Way, with the expanding and contracting and the various points that. And this one is really, you really feel that in, because he, at the very last part, he really goes to the highest note. But what's incredible about this song to me, and this is again something that Eubie did constantly in all his songs, is the highly unorthodox form. It's not to get too technical, but there's an 8-bar section, one 8-bar section, and then one 7-bar section.
7 bars.
Yeah, it's like A, B, C. It's just complete. It's through composed. It's not following the regular thing. However, you would never notice that, because it's just so natural. And this is something that I think is really interesting. This song, we don't know what year it was written. Maybe he wrote it in 1919, maybe 1918, maybe 1917. We just don't know. And I think, I've had this theory, and this is just my personal opinion, but maybe it's true, that the kind of canon of popular song and the kind of things that the devices that then became codified in songwriting, they weren't really present in the teens, because it didn't get codified really until later. It's like if you listen to even don't go 10 years later and Fats Waller is writing songs, right? Who I love. You see him, he's up in my corner there in the yellow, in the painting over there. That's Fats. You could say and Fats was Mozartian in his output and the songs, but on the bridge he's doing this progression. Oh, he's doing this, and this is this. It's very easy to say these forms because they were already codified by then. There's none of that in Eubie Blake. It's like, and I'm not sure it's because it could have been because the rules weren't written yet, so it was almost freer, or it's just because he was, again, a genius and just heard this other way of writing, which was much freer and open, and it's almost he was creating his own forms. It wasn't a predetermined form and I'm putting this melody in. No, just the music dictated the form, and that that to me is like the ultimate thing, because it sounds completely natural. It doesn't sound like there's nothing forced in it. All throughout these songs and Shuffle Along, there's extra bars here, there's truncated bars there, and it always just sounds like it's flowing, like the most natural thing. Yeah, this is a tune that again I really, and I'm proud that I have the only recorded version of this. Nobody else has ever recorded it, so at least I did something.
I hope you can make it better known throughout your career, because it's beautiful. It's just
it's really pretty.
All right. Our next song is, I've lost my list. Help me here, Avery. Oh, thank you.
Good night, Angelina.
The presentation of this song in Shuffle Along was as a barbershop quartet. There's a point in the play or the musical where this group comes on, or singers who say, yeah, we're here for the entertainment, and says, well, show me what it is you're going to be doing, and then they sing the song Good Night, Angeline. And the excerpt that we're going to listen to is from the same group. They're called the Four Harmony Kings, who sung it in the show. And just as an interesting historical footnote, the bass singer had to leave the show for a month towards the end of its Broadway run, and a very young Paul Robeson was tapped to replace him. And it was Robeson's first appearance, professional appearance as a singer and on Broadway. The recording is from the original members of the Four Harmony Kings, and let's listen to it, and then Ehud can comment on it.
Yeah, that old town clock was striking, and alive. Was it time that we were hiking? And I surely hate to leave you, honey. Did I do? 'Twas honey, child, when you ain't near to me, I feel blue. Oh, good night, my Angelina. Farewell, my girl, so far. Leaving time is leaving time. I hate to part with my baby, my heart. Right time, one day for loving is the right time. But now this is much finer. Hugging seems a liner, but I must leave you, honey. Oh, good night, Angeline.
Well, this is definitely one of my favorite songs from Shuffle Along. Again, I recorded this song twice. I originally recorded it for a trio album called Music Makes Me in 2013, and then I recorded it again for the album. This is one of the tunes that I would say is like the perfect example of it's so open. Like there's so many different kinds of interpretation. When I'm just going to quickly demonstrate. when I originally recorded it, I just recorded it like a jazz song. So. And then when I recorded it again for the solo piano record, I played it like a bossa nova. This tune, to me, it's like there's so much going on. It sounds so simple. It almost sounds like a childhood song, or like not a nursery rhyme necessarily, or like a song kids would sing. You know, like almost like there's some like folk element there. I remember I played it. My friend is a great bass player, Neil Miner. He's played with everybody, and he's one of these guys that if you play a song he doesn't know, he doesn't want music. He says just play it, and I'll get it, and which I totally respect, because it's a way, it's almost meditative, that you're forced to concentrate and be in the moment, and it's a great way to learn music and play music. And whenever I remember specifically I played the song with him, and he said, oh yeah, that song, as if, and I know he didn't know the song, but what he meant was like, oh, that melody, it's like, it's almost as if like that melody is in the ether, and it's like, this is one of the songs that sounds like it was composed before time, and it was always there, and like Eubie just took it out of the air. It's like almost as if it's always been there, or something like that. To me, it just feels like it's so perfect. And again, once you start looking at it, is extremely unusual. So it's 2 8-bar sections, and then a 2-bar tag with harmonically, it's the Neapolitan 6, which is kind of this ominous, good night, Angeline. And even the melody, it's different. It's 2 sections which are harmonically almost as identical, but the melody is completely different both times. So it would have been easy for him just to do the same thing, copy and paste, but he doesn't. He writes a completely different thing. And to me, again, you hear it and it's just perfect. It's just, it's literally like.
Can you demonstrate that on the piano?
Yeah. You mean how it's different?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the first time, he says. Now it's the second time. And here's the tag. So it's almost like the second time when the melody, it's the same harmonic progression over, but it's an embellishment of the melody. He's adding to it, and this again, and then rhythmically, there's all these other layers going on underneath, because Eubie was writing music in the ragtime era, so that rhythmic thing of it's basically 8 to the bar, different from later jazz that started in the late 20s and 30s where it had a swing feel. It's very different, and there's this other there's a different kind of syncopation going on, and I think that's kind of what lends it to like being interpreted in many different ways, because of the certain feeling of ragtime. There's many different subdivisions, and it's almost like the notes, the syncopation comes from the fact that it's actually syncopated. It's not swung in the sense that the swing, there's a kind of accent, a kind of agogics that you put on it, because it's you can lay back or lay forward. But with this, it's different. It's the actual syncopation being there, and that where the accents are put on these 8 beats.
Yeah, I mean, you see that in Scott Joplin in classic ragtime.
Absolutely, absolutely. And and Eubie has that element, but then he's also bringing in other elements, like I would say the bel canto thing. You don't really see that so much in Joplin. And there's a certain amount of, like, Eubie is just, you can and play. I mean, what I basically did on Shuffle Along was, my concept was like, let me go back and play these songs, but have all my, influences of jazz piano, which are from the, from his time up until, later on, to Thelonious Monk and Bill Evans, so the fact that his writing is so open allows you to do that.
Right. Who would think of pairing bossa nova with something that was, that was composed during a ragtime, late ragtime?
Well, what's funny is it's exactly, but the rhythmic feel is very similar because of the straight eighth notes.
Mm-hmm.
Like, especially like, Latin, Brazilian music, especially the 16th note, or the symbol, it's the same actually as ragtime.
Wow.
The swing feeling that happened later, that's different because you're pulling back and there's more of a triplet feel. But
Right.
This stuff is very much in that vein.
Right. The thing that I love the vocal arrangement of Goodnight Angeline, but I think the complexity of it actually obscures the melodiousness and the unusual structure of it. Like that tagline, it was like, whoa, that really struck me, even in that arrangement.
Yeah, no, it's really like, I remember when I first heard it, you hear the da 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 da, I just immediately thought of Thelonious Monk, because I thought of the way he plays chords and there's the intervals, and it was exactly that. And then when I play it with a bass player and a drummer, that's kind of the way I'm hearing it. I really, it's just, again, it's this, I think it's Eubie Blake, genius. It's like he just could take these things that seem like they're out of the blue and he makes them work. Because a lot of people take things that are out of the blue and they sound out of the blue.
And you find this so often true with the standards that come out of the 20s. When you hear the way they were performed on Broadway, it's like, who would have guessed, that sorry, I'm blanking on. There's so many George Gershwin songs that, when they were played in the 20s theater style, you don't recognize their genius, and then until they're brought into other traditions.
Absolutely. Well, this could be a controversial topic, but I'm a jazz guy. I'm a jazz piano player. I'm a New York jazz pianist. I love James P. Johnson. I love Bud Powell. So I have always been very much, I'm simpatico with that opinion. For me, the greatest interpreters of Gershwin are Billie Holiday and Art Tatum and Teddy Wilson and those people. Although the theater way, it's its own thing. It's definitely its own thing. But I much agree with you that, yeah, for me, those songs really were brought to life and actually kept alive by jazz musicians. Someone like Sonny Rollins. I think he even might have said one time, he should have gotten an award from ASCAP for keeping, these songs alive, because he just would play these tunes and maybe they wouldn't have been in the canon unless jazz musicians would have played them. I definitely agree. I definitely agree. But Eubie is different because coming from more of a jazz background, it's a different kind of thing in those tunes.
But I think he's somewhat neglected for that same reason. He didn't have a string of Broadway hits for one reason.
Right, exactly. He was much, absolutely. And I think maybe it's also possible his fame as a ragtime composer of pieces kind of eclipsed his songs. I would say that. And
when he had to come back, it was as a ragtime. It's the ragtime. He's an amazing pianist.
Oh, of course. We're not even talking about that. Yeah, the guy he's like a ragtime Franz Liszt as far as I'm concerned.
But point that you're making, and really hit me to it, is what a remarkable beat composer he is.
Song composer specifically. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Passing on to the next one. It's I'm Craving for That Kind of Love. This was a song that made a star out of a young woman in the show by the name of Florence Mills. She, her performance in Shuffle Along led her to a career not only on Broadway but in New York that was stellar. She really skyrocketed. Somewhat surprisingly, she was very petite. She had a flute, she had a bird-like voice, but apparently it was very pure delivery. People loved it, and you know, for an artist dying young at the height of their fame is always a good career move. Unfortunately, that's what happened. I think that tuberculosis took her out in 1927, and her funeral in Harlem was saluted by 10,000 people who gathered outside the funeral home. She was much beloved. But the song that launched the beginning of her career was this one, I'm Craving for That Kind of Love, which, as Ehud will point out, gets very intense in its own way. When we listen to the excerpt.
Whisper, whisper, whisper to me soft and low. Something nice, you know, honey, 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 when there's no one near. Oh, baby dear, well, cuddle me, sing to me, cling to me, spoon to me, crow to me, sigh to me, cry to me. I'm craving for that kind of love.
Yeah, this this song I love so much, and this is a great example of harmonically, and this is something that Eubie Blake really was a master at. And this is again a testament to his greatness. Aside from these, he could write songs that were so unusual, like Everything Reminds Me of You, or Goodnight Angeline. But then he could also turn around and write songs that weren't unusual at all, actually were quite ordinary, but somehow you're just so moved by them. And this one for me is one of them. Harmonically, this, even though again this was probably written in the teens, there's a lot of songs that have this kind of the harmonic progression. All of Me has it. There's not a lot new harmonic material, and even melodically it's not. But somehow he just builds this whole thing to the last section, where I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm just a romantic, but it's like by the end, I'm like, I have goosebumps and a tear in my eye just because, when he gets to the, you're just so, it's one of those things it's almost hard to explain because it's, there's no incredible modulation. There's no incredible anything, but it's just like something that's so simple, yet it just moves you. That's how I feel. I don't know. I'm sorry I'm not expressing this well because I don't think it can be expressed, actually. I think there's just something very emotive that Eubie was tapped into. Like sometimes you don't have to do something extraordinary. Sometimes simplicity can really be be the most effective tool.
Right, but by that same token, the interpretation is crucial, or how it's delivered, I should say.
Sure.
And I think the woman who was singing on the exit, once again, this is not a song that's done very much.
No. I'm so happy we're doing this because I'm playing Sunday night and I'm gonna do some of these tunes just because they're coming back, and I'm just remembering how great they are, and I haven't done them well. I mean, nobody's done anything in a year, but
Welcome
uh,
back.
I can say, hey, this is the 100th anniversary of Shuffle Along, and you know, check
Yeah.
out this discussion we had on Friday.
Yeah. Well, as I've said before, I anything you can do to bring some recognition to Everything Reminds Me of You. It's this
Yeah.
gorgeous, gorgeous ballad. All right, the pièce de résistance, my friend, the one
Oh yeah.
everybody knows. I'm just wild about Harry. Once again, it's a love song between, it's expressed by the leading lady for the man that she wants to marry, Harry. Um, it was, I hope I won't spoil this for you, Ehud, but it was originally conceived of as a waltz.
Yep. That's right.
And George C. Wolfe, in his adaptation / revival of Shuffle Along in 1916, recounted this story on the stage itself, where you see the transformation from the waltz in which it was originally conceived to was it two-step?
Up Foxtrot, I think.
Foxtrot, right? Sorry.
Two-step too.
And anybody, if it's became so ingrained within the culture that you've either heard of it or you haven't heard of it. But a lot of people, they may not know the history and they may not even know the words, which are not wonderful, but they've certainly known the tune. It's extremely infectious and entertaining. It's been around for 100 years, and Harry Truman adopted it for his presidential theme song, which of course boosted its fame. During a later part of the century, it became regarded as corny, which I think is really more a problem with the lyrics than the tune itself. But there's a reason that it's never going to go away, and it's not just because it's an earworm. And you'll hear why when we listen to Ehud's. I'm not even going to call it a reinterpretation. I'm going to call it an excavation of the tune. Can we have it, please? Please.
Oh, so yeah, what you said, it's true about the song has kind of become corny. Yes, agreed. Agreed. Also, probably because of the lyric. But you have to think about why did it also become corny? Taking the lyric out of it, there's something in the song that's like irresistible. Um, Again, this is off the top, highly unusual form wise. I mean, I can't think of any other song from the 1921 with this form. It's like, so looking at it, if you look at it from like the macro, you would say it's two halves with a little tag. But if you look at it closer, it's like there's an 8-bar section, another 8-bar section, which is almost completely different, then another 8 and other 8 bars, which harkens back to the first but changes harmonically, and then another 12-bar section, which has this extended tag. I mean, again, I just, and then the repetitive part of the, well, he's just wild about, I'm just wild about that tag, but it's like,
Right.
I mean, it's like Jobim did that later with the Waters of March. It's just, I don't know how he figured this out, and I don't know how he figured it out, and harmonically extremely rich. The song, after, I'm just wild about Harry and he's just wild about me, it lands on the major 7th chord. That's highly unusual for 1921 to say, it's the 7th note of the scale. We kind of take it for granted now because that's a common sound, but in 1921, that was not commonplace at all. I mean, it must have been, people must have just been listening to that, and they're just their hair must have stood on the back of their head. I mean, that's just really.
I think it was ahead of his time. I don't think they realized what he.
Yes, I don't think they'd realized. Yeah, and also I don't think they realized because it sounded so natural.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like you don't realize when someone's because it makes perfect sense. It's not. There's nothing pretentious. There's nothing like he's trying to do this because he's showing off. No, he's just doing this because that was inside of him. This song, on the album, I recorded it twice. I recorded it as a waltz in 3, as it originally was a waltz, and I played it more as a jazz waltz, not as a strict, kind of old time waltz, which probably was how it was done. And then the second time I did it like as a very up tempo thing, and really kind of trying to evoke Bud Powell and Elmo Hope, these kind of bebop pianists, because again, this song in the stride pianists repertoire is kind of very well known. Again, well known, I say, within these people, this group of people who live under a rock. Myself included. I mean, but Donald Lambert was a very famous piano player, the same generation as Fats Waller, who lived in New Jersey, and he made a lot of famous recordings of this song, kind of as a tour de force kind of stride piano vehicle, really left hand, really. So it kind of lived in that world among these jazz musicians. So I chose to give it a more modern interpretation, just to add a new, and it's fantastic. I mean, you could play this song as a waltz, you can play it, as a stride piano piece, you could play it as a bebop. I mean, there's no limits to this stuff. It's just so open.
I mean, one of the at Shoga, we do a newsletter once a month, and in the newsletter we have a song of the month. And the song of the month was "I'm Just Wild About Harry," but I chose the latest iteration of it, which is by a contemporary singer by the name of Morgan, but he spells his name Morgxn. And it's the end song of a gay rom-com, a gay romantic comedy called The Thing About Harry. And I mean, he takes liberties with it, but it's a very clean version, and it's wonderful. It's really wonderful.
Again, this is one that just like melodically, you could make it I could see an operatic singer, doing a more leader-like classical version. I mean, it's just one of these, again, perfect melodies where it plays on the scale, like I'm just looking down, I'd written out some sheet music when I recorded this. I dug this up, and when you look at this stuff, you can really see the architecture in the music. Like it almost like you can look at it and know it's going to be good just by how the balance in the skips, whether they're intervallic or stepwise. I mean, it looks like, it's like Schubert or something like that, the melody to me. I mean, it's so perfect.
I think what was going on, I think part of the reason for sort of the inability of his audience, even up to the present day to recognize his gifts was in a song like "Why I'm Just Wild About Harry." What hits you over the head is the tag. Nobody
Yeah.
tag. But if you're not familiar with a seventh interval, within the confines of a popular song, it just may pass right over your head.
Yeah. Although you might have found yourself leaving the theater singing that seventh interval.
But you don't recognize how
But
unusual.
you don't recognize that. Yeah, sure. No, and I think, obviously, Eubie was playing, Eubie was playing in Atlantic City in 1906. I remember reading one of his first gigs was playing at a hotel owned by Joe Gans, who was a boxer in 1906 in Atlantic City, and he was making $50 a week, playing 7 days a week, which that was good money back then, playing piano. And he split the bill. I can't imagine what the other piano players were like back then. There was a lot of piano playing going on, and these guys, they played everything. They played opera, they played ragtime, they played French songs. We're forgetting at, the turn of the century, Rachmaninoff was playing, you have Joseph Hoffman, Paderewski. The level of just playing the piano was just giants were just doing it. And these guys who were popular piano players playing in bars, they played all that stuff and then more too.
Yeah. And of course, ragging the classics was a
Of course. You were expected to do that. You played all the music. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, as I told you, the time would fly by, and so it has. I want to thank you for participating in this conversation. It's been such a pleasure for me.
Thank you for having me, Robert.
And you've really opened my eyes to the depth and genius of Eubie Blake. I hope you can take that message out into the world, because I wish there were decent recordings of yours, with the exception of yours. They're just he's just not performed sufficiently.
Yeah, there's not. There's just a handful of songs, but yeah, it's not. We should definitely try to make a push to have some of these more in the canon, in the standards.
Yeah. So, I'm sorry, I should have prepared some sort of link. There will be a link on my website, and you have a website too, do you not?
Yep, it's just EHUD piano, ehudpiano.com.
Okay. And on Shoga Films, on my website and in our various social media outlets, there will be a link to Ehud's Shuffle Along. Very much worth getting. It's only in digital form now, right, Ehud?
Yeah, you know what? As of now, I think it's only in digital form. Although I can get copies. I just haven't gotten recently because I had sold out, and then with the last year with the pandemic, I would usually just have copies that I would bring. I would have at my live performances, and obviously this last year, there's we've all been severely derailed with that.
But people could go on Amazon or Barnes and Noble.
It's on iTunes. It's on Apple Music, and it's on that, and it's on Amazon as well.
Well, Sunday, the 23rd, centenary of Shuffle Along, Ehud will be having a live performance, which I'm sure is a relief to him. It's been a while.
Definitely.
And we will continue our adventures in Shoga. June will be Pride Month, so we're shifting our focus to the LGBT contributions to the Harlem Renaissance, which has been one of our focuses. And I will be in New York, actually. Hopefully out to meet up with or hear.
Yeah, let's have lunch.
Definitely, you're on. Thank you for tuning in. Any final words, Ehud?
No, I want to thank you for making this happen. It was a nice surprise that you contacted me out of the blue. You do something like very obscure, and you don't think anybody is gonna take note of it, and for them, and it's just nice to, one.
It resonates. Not the end.
One quick story. I think maybe the listeners might find this funny if you don't mind indulging me. Downbeat magazine has a blindfold test. Do you know about this? In the back, they basically interview well-known musicians and play them songs and say, guess who it is. So they played a very well-known pianist. They played him one of the tracks from the record, and the guy said he heard it and he said, "Wow, this is amazing! 5 stars. This piano player is probably dead."
Ah!
Meaning like it sounded like I was playing. I sounded like a dead guy, whoever it was, and then so I said, "That's a compliment." I said, "I sound like a dead guy." It's good.
Class. Well, thank God you're not dead, and you're young and have many decades of wonderful music ahead of you. So keep excavating that canon, because there's a lot there that needs to be.
Thank you so much, Robert. I appreciate that.
Okay. I think we're done. I'm going to say goodbye to everybody. Ehud, thanks again.
Thank you, Robert.
All right. I'll see you in New York.
I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
When I showed my well-regarded short documentary, Tain't Nobody's Business, at a bilingual film festival in Montreal, a black lesbian in the audience stood up during the Q&A and said, "I don't know why you made this, but I'm glad you did." Obviously, I'm not black. I'm queer, I'm Jewish, but I am deeply involved in black culture, from having studied it, from having lived in Africa. These are all sort of externals. There's this sense of connection that I have that ultimately I don't think I can explain. The first short that I did was Ma Rainey's Lesbian Licks. Ma Rainey's Lesbian Licks was a cover of a 1926 song that Ma Rainey had recorded that celebrates lesbian love.
Went out last night with a crowd of my friends. They must have been women, 'cause I don't like no men.
It showed me how much enthusiasm there was in the black community for this kind of project, no matter where it came from. From that point on, I was hooked on the filmmaking as a process and on the community that I was working with and I think serving to some degree. After that, I made Congo Cabaret, our first narrative short, with Quincy and DeAndre Gosfield, who took over the reins and did a bang-up job, made a beautiful short based on a script that I had adapted from a Harlem Renaissance novel by Claude McKay, who was himself a gay writer. For Shoga Films, there flows 3 lines of inquiry. Number 1, the interrelations of blackness and queer identity. Number 2, the comparison of black and Jewish identity. What are their similarities, their parallels, their differences, and what do they have to say about minority status in America? The third area is cultural production as markers of identity and areas of resistance. I focus on music because I love music. I don't know that any artist can ultimately understand the source of his or her passion, where it comes from, where it takes him. What I want to prove is the importance of being an ally. God knows in these fragmented times, we need as much bridge building and mutual acceptance and listening as we can get.